Starting on page 7, we are going to look at a new batch of identities. We're going to review the product to sum and the sum to product identities. It says the sum and difference identities can be used to derive formulas for writing the products of sines and or cosines as sums or differences. These identities are usually called the product to sum formulas. So they are listed in the box. There are 4 of them, okay? So before I read through these, I want you to notice that if you look on the left side of the equal sign, what you're going to see is something times something, okay? So you're going to see a product, you're multiplying, and then on the right side of the equal sign, you see a sum or a difference, okay, because you're adding or subtracting, okay? So you have a sum or a difference, okay? So that's why these guys are called product to sum formulas, because you're starting out with multiplication and then it's being changed over to something you're either adding or subtracting, okay? Also, something I want to point out before I read through these, notice these equations are labeled 6 through 9. So there are a ton of identities in this particular section. So I started labeling them early on. If you noticed with the double angle formulas back on page 1, these are labeled equations 1 through 5. So this newest batch is the product to sum formulas. That's going to pick up where this starts the new batch of identities, I should say. So we just start numbering number 6. So these guys will be 6 through 9, and then we'll get to another set that will pick up with equation 10 and so on, just in case I have to refer back to any particular equation. Okay. All right, so here we go. Equation 6 tells us that the sine of A times the sine of B is equal to 1/2 times the entire quantity cosine of A minus B minus the cosine of A plus B. Equation 7, the cosine of A times the cosine of B is equal to 1/2 times the cosine of A plus B plus the cosine of A minus B. Equation 8, sine of A times the cosine of B is equal to 1/2 times the sine of A plus B plus the sine of A minus B. And the last one here, equation 9, cosine of A times the sine of B is equal to 1/2 times the sine of A plus B minus the sine of A minus B. All right, so I am going to show you where these guys come from. I'm going to prove equation number 6. Okay, so there's room here for me to do the derivation. I will show you how to get it. And then there's a note at the bottom here saying that the formulas 7, 8, and 9 can be derived similarly. Okay, at the very top, it gave you a clue as to how these guys come about. They come from the sum and difference identities. Okay, so let me show you. Okay, it's always good to know where these guys come from. All right, I am going to prove this particular equation. Okay, so we have done several proofs in this class already, and I've always told you that in doing a proof of something, math people have to get super duper creative. Okay, so here we go. This is how this particular derivation works for formula number 6. I am going to start off with, if you notice on the right side here, it has cosine of A minus B. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and write that down. And what I'm going to write is basically, we know a formula for this. We've already learned the difference formula for cosine. Okay, when you do a proof, you can use things that you have already proved, things you already know. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and write down what I know. I know that the cosine of A minus B is the cosine of A times the cosine of B plus the sine of A times the sine of B. Okay, and then if I go back up and look at what I'm trying to prove, it also mentions the cosine of A plus B. Okay, so that is the sum formula for cosine. And we know what that is. That is the cosine of A times the cosine of B minus the sine of A times the sine of B. All right. Well, if I go back up, okay, and I'm looking on the right side here, I've got cosine of A minus B, and I've got cosine of A plus B, and I'm going to subtract them. Okay, so that's what I'm going to do in my next step. I am going to subtract these guys. Okay, and I am going to do this like according to the sides of the equations. Okay, so I'm going to subtract the left sides of the equation, and I'm going to subtract the right sides of the equations. Okay, so here we go. This is going to be kind of long, so I'm going to give myself some room here. I'm going to start off with the cosine of A minus B, and then I'm going to subtract the cosine of A plus B. Okay, so what is that going to give me? Well, the cosine of A minus B in blue, we said that's the cosine of A times the cosine of B plus the sine of A times the sine of B. And we are subtracting from that the expansion of the cosine of A plus B. Okay, now that has two terms, so you have to be careful here when you subtract this quantity. It needs to go in parentheses so you do the distribution correctly. Okay, so I am subtracting cosine of A times the cosine of B minus the sine of A times the sine of B. Okay, so that is what I have so far. Okay, and then just follow your instinct. Okay, what should I do now? Well, I'm going to do the distribution on the right side. Okay, so on the left side here, nothing is going to change. This is going to be same thing as before. So cosine of A minus B minus the cosine of A plus B. All right, the blue stuff is not going to change. And then you need to do the distribution of the negative sign. Okay, so we'll get negative cosine of A cosine B, and then minus times minus will give me a positive sine A sine B. All right, so then I can clean stuff up on this right side. Okay, if you notice, you are left with a positive cosine A cosine B. That's going to cancel with a negative cosine A cosine B. And then I have a positive sine A sine B, and I have another positive A sine B. Okay, so two positive sine A sine B's. We can combine those guys. Okay, they're like terms. This is going to give us 2 sine A times sine B. Okay, on the right side. And the left side has still not changed. Okay, so it's this guy. All right, so if we go back up to what we're trying to derive, okay, notice the left side of the equation here, okay, the left side, it is solved for sine A sine B, okay, so if we go down to our work, I see that, okay, I see the sine A times the sine of B, but I need to get rid of the 2 in front, okay, so since we're multiplying here, I'm going to do the opposite, I'm going to divide off the 2. Okay, so on the right side, the 2's are going to cancel. We are going to get left with sine A, sine B. Okay, so that's going right here. That is going to equal, okay, on the right, or sorry, on the left side, we are dividing that entire numerator by 2. If you divide by 2, that's the same thing as multiplying by 1/2. So I'm going to say this is going to be 1/2 times the entire quantity in the numerator, which is cosine of A minus B minus the cosine of A plus B. Okay, and this is exactly equation number 6. Okay, you scroll back up, the left side is sine A times sine B. That's equal to 1/2 times the entire quantity cosine of A minus B minus the cosine of A plus B. Okay, so we were able to derive this particular product to sum formula using the sum and difference formulas. Like I said, equations 7, 8, and 9 can be derived in a similar way.